everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Motivate with Coach Camp. I, of course, am your host, Coach Camp, and I am down here in the exuberantly exciting studios of SRP with Mr. Derek Me Show. Hey, if you guys have been following, then you know that we have had a very awesome series that I just kind of put together. I've been doing a lot of individual stuff, but this kind of came together. It's all organic, which is a lot of the stuff that I end up doing. But when I found this other person that blended perfectly with my guest today, I had to run them back to back. And I know you guys are going to appreciate that. So there's a lot of, whichever one goes first, the other one's going to play off of that. And you're going to love this stuff. But my guest today actually comes to us from Alabama. And she's going to explain more about where she lives and all that in just a minute. But she is Miss Carolyn O'Byrne. Carolyn O'Byrne or O'Brien?
O'Byrne.
O'Byrne. I want to make sure I said that right, guys. So Miss Carolyn O'Byrne, she runs a nonprofit, Daisy's Place, which was founded in 2022. And this is a resident that will help out families whenever they are in the area and they need somewhere to stay for their hospital. But I'm going to let her talk all about that. And I just want to say thank you so much, Miss Carolyn, for coming on the show. Welcome to the Coach Camp podcast.
Thank you so much, Coach Camp.
Yes, ma'am. So it's kind of interesting because you came across my content several months back. I don't exactly remember how far back. And you reached out to me, and I think it was at the inception. You were kind of getting things going with your nonprofit. And at that time, the series I had lined up, which is a blessing. This is a blessing, everyone. So I'm saying this very humbly. I have guests that are lined up and I start plugging them where they fit in. And then it's like, sometimes it may be 6 or 7 months before it cycles, but you were so patient with me. And it finally made its way through. And I'm so glad you're here today. And I know that your story is going to be amazing. So if you would share with my listeners, my viewers, where you're from, a little bit about your background.
Right now, I live in Killen, Alabama.
Okay.
Which is a big old suburb of Florence. Mm-hmm. We have a few banks and 2 red lights.
Oh, I've lived in towns like that. Yeah. The stop sign's a hangout spot. Yeah, I got you. And how long have you been there?
I've been in the Florence area for almost 20 years.
Okay. All right. So where were you born and raised?
Fort Payne, Alabama.
Fort Payne. How far down is that? I'm not even sure.
That is very northeast.
Oh, okay. So
Florence is the northwest corner and Fort Payne is the northeast corner.
You know, it's funny how people pick up on podcasting and stuff, and then you have like pockets of individuals, but like from mid Alabama up, I have a lot of listeners. And then like, as you get down to the coast in the Foley area, I got a lot of listeners. So it's kind of interesting how states just happen, but nevertheless, so you've grown up in Alabama your whole life.
I've lived a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I've been in Alabama.
So growing up, do you have brothers, sisters?
One sister.
One sister. And when you were a youngster growing up, what was life like down there in Alabama? I imagine it's probably similar to Mississippi. They look like the same state, just facing different directions.
Probably very similar, very country, very backwoods. Where I grew up, it was anyway.
Well, did you guys have real sweet tea?
Oh, yeah. It was a very divided home. Mama would only drink sweet tea. And Daddy was from up north, and he would only drink unsweetened tea. So I like both because one or the other was in the fridge, and I didn't want to waste time figuring out which one was the one. So I just got me a drink, and whatever it was fine with me.
I got you. Well, so you know it's real sweet tea if you spill it on the floor, and like a month later you still feel sticky stuff around there. That's how you know you're putting enough sugar in. In fact, I had a foreign exchange student from Brazil, and at one point in time she goes, how many cups of sugar do you use? I said, I'll use cups, baby. I use inches. You got to know how many inches are in the bottom of the tea thing. Now you know where you're at. So that's how you judge it in the South. So when you were growing up, what were you thinking Miss Carolyn was going to grow up and become?
Oh boy, I wanted to become all kinds of things. I wanted to be a mechanic.
Like a car mechanic?
Yeah.
Is that what your dad did?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
I wanted to be a fireman.
Oh.
I wanted to be a male person, or a fire person.
It's all right. It's generalized. We get it. Yeah. I work with plenty of females. Yeah, I got you.
What else did I want to be? I can't remember, but when I was about 13 or 14 years old, things changed, and I decided I was going to be a hairdresser.
Okay.
And from that moment on, that was my pure focus. And I did. I became a hairdresser for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
and
So
then had some kids and became mom.
got you. So out of high school, you went to, I don't know what the hairdresser school would be.
Cosmetology
I
school.
would assume that, but I didn't want to say because I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Camp, don't do it. So cosmetology school, and then did you have your own place or did you work at a place?
I worked at a place.
Yeah, because I know folks that if they end up owning their own business, they get stressed out and don't like it as much. Now that's not for
Mhm.
everybody, but that is I've had personal experience with some folks like that in the hair cutting business, if you will. So, what brought you out of that? Was it the children?
Oh
What
yeah,
put the brakes on the hairdressing world?
I wanted to stay home with the kids
Yeah. And so
for
that
sure.
obviously, and there ain't nothing wrong with that, of course. So being a stay-at-home mom is one of the harder jobs you will ever face. It's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
I saw my mom work all day, every day. So when you decide to make that transition, you were in Alabama at the time, right?
We were in Tennessee at that time,
Okay. What part?
Nashville.
When you have your first kid. So I know about Daisy's story, and we're about to get to Daisy's story, which is the compelling part of everything. But this is obviously a part of the trajectory of your life, right? So Daisy was your first or second child?
Second that I gave birth to, but fourth because I had two that I didn't give birth to before
Okay,
her.
fair enough. So then
So
you have,
she's the youngest.
so she's the youngest of four total.
Yes.
Okay, so the first two, and then how old are they?
33, 29, 25, 22.
Okay, so spread out a little bit.
Mhm.
I have a 14-year-old daughter, and then she has a 27 and a 26-year-old brother. So it's
Wow.
very stretched on that part. So you guys, when you have your first child up there in Nashville, the Daisy's not born up there, right?
Daisy was born in Huntsville.
Huntsville. Okay. So that's where we're getting to with the story. So that transitioned a lot of probably who you are and what your mission was. So when you guys are living up in Nashville, you make the decision, you're coming back down to Alabama, right? So you move down to Huntsville and the baby comes along, Daisy. So the
Mhm.
other children, they were all fine. Nobody had problems, nothing like that, right?
Right.
Okay. So then clearly at this point, you have your fourth child coming into the picture and there's expectations. What were you thinking about doing at that time in your life? Were you just going to be a stay at home or were you thinking you were about to branch into other things? What was going on?
Pretty much stay at home mom and whenever the kids got old enough, because I homeschooled. So
Okay.
whenever the kids got old enough, I didn't know exactly what I would do. So
Just going to let it happen when it happened.
yeah.
I got you. So then when Daisy comes into the picture, now this is the part, folks, where, it seems like we're almost jumping too much, but we're really not because there's so much to the story on the after effect of how Daisy impacts your life. And then ultimately has now led to a point where you're getting to impact so many other people's lives. And I think that's so important. So when Daisy's born, you said, and I've read your story, if you want to share some of that, leading up to the birth, what were some of the problems the doctors were seeing because they were saying that this was going to be a high risk pregnancy?
Hmm. Yep. I was with a high risk doctor almost the whole entire time. They told me she had chromosomal issues.
Mm,
And at one point when I went in, I was about 7+ months along. He said we need to do a amniocentesis. And one of the problems is she was in there almost dry. What can we do about knowing this information? And he said, nothing. You'll just know.
mm.
And I said, no, that's okay. He said, you don't want to know? And I said, no. And he said, well, at this point along, we feel like the chromosomal defects are going to be big enough that if you wanted to abort,
Hmm.
we might suggest doing that. And I
This
said,
was at 7 months.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't tell that to a pregnant lady. I said, my name is not God.
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
something wrong with her. God makes that decision, not me.
Yeah.
So, really, really close to the end of the pregnancy, all of a sudden there was nothing wrong.
So were you
They,
having problems yourself? Physical
oh
problems?
boy,
Okay.
I was sick.
Yeah. So
Very
understatement.
sick. Oh yeah.
Yeah. When did that start? Was that early in the pregnancy?
Yes, I had to be on IV fluids for a while because I would just stay dehydrated. I just couldn't keep anything down
Oh,
for probably 7 months.
was it that way with the other pregnancy?
Oh, it
Oh,
was worse with the first one
oh
because I didn't
wow.
know what I was doing.
So
I
this
ended up in the hospital with the first one.
that tells me right there. So how much stronger women are than men. If I had suffered like that the first round, I'm like, you know what, we're good. We're saying we're good at this point. So I mean, my daughter's crying at night led me to making sure there was no more babies coming into our world. It was like, no, doc, I'm bringing my own scissors. We're getting this taken care of. We can't do this again. So you struggle through, you're fighting through, you get to the end of the pregnancy, and the doctors are saying, hey, look, we're not seeing anything's wrong.
Right. And she
Wow.
was born and they said she was fine.
So no problems at birth.
Well, that's what they said.
Okay, so
I
like
knew,
with you and the baby at the time, there was no like
right,
emergent situation. Okay, so
right.
baby comes out, everything seems to be fine. How
hmm
long does that last, or do they send you straight home?
We went home the normal time frame.
Okay.
I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something wasn't right. So in that first 17 months of her life, I had asked the pediatrician several times, this is what she's doing, what's wrong?
Hmm.
One of her symptoms were her legs were blue.
Oh my,
And
all
I
the time or
said,
just periodically?
just most of the time.
Oh wow,
And the pediatrician said, oh, that's just fat baby syndrome.
I've never heard of that.
She was really fussy.
Mhm.
Sometimes she was really happy sometimes, but really fussy sometimes. And she got tagged as spoiled rotten. There's a difference between spoiled and
Mhm.
something's wrong.
Sure, and
And
moms are going to know that before anyone.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
there was something wrong.
Hmm.
So at 17 months old, I had two sick ones. I brought them both to the pediatrician. One had a fever and clearly had the crud.
Hmm.
And Daisy had been coughing and having some things, but it was just different.
How old was Daisy at that time?
17 months.
So is at that time. This is when the moment
Mhm.
happens. Okay,
This is when the moment happened.
gotcha.
And so that morning I had them to the doctor and they said she had the croup or something, was sick, quote unquote. But again, it was just different. So at lunchtime, oh, it was nap time for her. She was still taking naps. And I just did not feel comfortable laying her down for a nap. Something was very wrong. So
That's
I
that
called
mother's
the,
intuition. I'm telling you,
yeah.
that is such a real deal.
So I called the pediatrician back same day and I said, something's still wrong. Something's still wrong. They said, well, bring her in. So I brought her back in. They did an x-ray and they said, it's croup. She's fine. They gave me some steroids and antibiotics and a bunch of stuff. So that night, it was about 9, and I thought, I am terrified to put this baby to bed.
Mhm.
Something is wrong. It's not the regular sickness. The other one was in there sick. I was taking care of her, and the other two were fine. One was sick, and then Daisy's situation.
I want to say something on that, Miss Carolyn, because this is a good point for any medical professionals out there that may be watching. As a paramedic, I always paid attention to not just the mother's intuition, but also where were they in the process of their children. So, like if this was mom's first child, you expect them to be hyper concerned, over the top with some things, and that's okay, that's normal. But if you're 3 or 4 kids deep and you're having those types of concern, and none of that had ever happened before, man, red flags come up so fast for me because you've seen and know your children, and you're having these concerns suddenly. That is definitely outside the norm. A new mom normally may be overly protected. That's normal. But when you've got 4 kids in, I mean, the fourth kid, sometimes you let them juggle hand grenades. You're just like, yeah, they'll be fine. So if you, with your reaction to that as a professional, medical professional, I would have been, okay, something's going on. We got to get this thing really checked out. So continue at that
Mhm,
point. So you see that this is not going well that night.
mhm. So I called the pediatrician back and I said, I don't feel comfortable putting her to bed. Something is still wrong. And they said, well, if it makes you feel better, take her to the emergency room. So I did. At that time, we lived in Athens, Alabama, and I took her to Huntsville Hospital.
How far is that for people?
45 minutes, something like that. And so we got in there. There was storms everywhere. Code black on the hospital. I didn't even know there was such a thing as code black. Maybe in the medical field, no one moved.
Mhm.
Wherever you were in that hospital, you stayed.
That means there's a tornado usually or tornado
Yes,
activity.
exactly. And in about 30 minutes, they said, she's fine. You can go home. And I said, I don't mean to be disrespectful here, but I am not leaving here until you find out what is wrong with her. So they put us in a room, and this was probably 10 o'clock. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, they came in to do some more testing or some testing. I don't know if they had gotten the tests from the doctor pediatrician earlier that day. Probably not, because they were probably closed. And by 6 o'clock in the morning, they came in and said, we don't want you to be alarmed, but we may have found that her heart might be a little bit enlarged. But we're going to wait for the specialist to come in and look at it. Well, by 9 o'clock in the morning, we were in a room, and the specialist had come in and said, her ejection fraction is at 13% of her heart. And if she lives long enough, she's going to need a new heart.
I can only imagine the flood of emotions that a mother feels right then. The I told you so moment, the anger, the fear, the sadness. I
What are you
imagine you
going
were
to
getting
do?
hit by all this.
Yeah. What am I going to do?
Mhm.
What are we going to do?
Yeah. And so at that point, obviously, there's a whole new perspective on what these folks have been directing their stuff towards. So what is the next step?
Since I had lived in Nashville before and knew some folks at Vanderbilt,
Mm.
that's where I felt most comfortable. Nothing against any other place. That's just where I felt like we needed to be. So it took them several days to get us moved over to Vanderbilt, but we ended up going to Vanderbilt, and they did a biopsy from her growing up. That right
Gotta
there,
be
that
heart
was the
wrenching.
first moment of me losing my mind.
Can imagine.
It was not good.
Mhm.
And her screaming
Mm.
of her not wanting to leave me, it was awful.
At that point, what was the game plan? So they do the biopsy. What's the next step for you?
So the biopsy was determined to determine what was going on.
Okay.
Come to find out, it wasn't her heart that was the problem.
Hmm.
Her heart had been fine, but her immune system had gotten the wrong information, and her immune system was killing her heart. It thought that her heart was the bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was doing everything in its power to get rid of it.
My goodness. So what was the name?
So
Is it autoimmune something? But do you know the name of it?
cardiomyopathy,
Okay.
um, maybe there was two words that I remember. It's been a while.
Sure. And in those
And
medical
they were,
terms, look, paramedic for 20 plus years, those medical terms I lose all the time. But yeah, so it's a disease, that's a disease process of the heart, but then the autoimmune part of it could be attributed to so many different things that cause that.
yeah,
So
I
what was the
remember
game
the
plan?
other word, cardiomyopathy and myocarditis. I remember that word
That's it.
too.
Yeah, that's inflammation of the heart. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they decided to put her on an experimental medication that was an immunosuppressant. And it was supposed to pretty much zap her immune system into forgetting what it thought it knew. And this experiment was a 14-day process. Well, in day 3, if I remember correctly, she started getting these little red bumps. And I called the doctor in and I said, she's got these little red bumps. And they said, oh, that's just contact dermatitis. So a couple hours later, more red bumps. So I called the doctor back in, and they said that's just contact dermatitis. And I said, I really don't think it is. I think there's something going on.
Allergic reaction, maybe?
So a couple hours later, I called them back in. They were kind of irritated by this time, but I said, it's a lot more. That's just contact dermatitis. Well, not long after that, she started screaming.
Mm.
And she screamed for 6.5 hours straight. Her fever started going up, and the last time they recorded it, it was 106.8. They were scrambling to find cooling blankets.
Mm.
I forgot let me back up just a little bit. That's part of the story. After the biopsy, they tried to get an IV, of course. I mean, that's a normal thing.
That's the next thing. Yeah.
They could not get an IV. They had her tied down head to toe, could not get an IV. Her circulatory system had never fully developed because her heart never pumped hard enough to develop it.
Sure.
So they went in and tried a PICC line on her left arm. It didn't work. Tried a PICC line on her right arm. It didn't work.
Mm.
So they took her to ICU and did a central line right in here somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked. And that's the line that they used for this experimental drug. So fast forward back to the story of screaming for 6.5 hours. So by the time her fever was up, all of her red dots were no longer red dots. She was just solid red. There were no dots anymore. She was sunburnt looking. And she was in such excruciating pain that all we could do is sit still. So I held her for 3 days straight. I got up once a day to go to the bathroom because if I moved a muscle, she would scream because she was in so much excruciating pain that that experimental drug had chemically fried her from the inside out. Once she started coming out of it after about 3 days and finally started walking around, people thought she was a burn victim. She looked like she had been put down in the French fry vat and left there for a few minutes and taken out. And then her skin started falling off. And she had blonde, curly, cherub-looking hair. She looked like a little cherub, big old round cheeks, blonde, curly cherub hair, big blue eyes. And her scalp skin that had loosened up to come off was so thick. It wasn't just flick it off. It was like pull it to the end of that hair to get it off.
Wow.
Her scalp off. It had already released. It was just dried, thick, almost t-shirt thick.
Wow.
So once she finally started recovering from that and her little skin looked so terrible, she started throwing up a
How
few
long
days
was
later.
that recovery process before then?
Probably at least a week before she was up and around.
I wanted to know that because that gives a little context to how long it took for that medicine to start to calm down, if you will, because it was
Well,
definitely
they
causing a
stopped
reaction.
it. They
Yeah.
stopped it that very early hours of the morning because the medicine was killing her faster than her body was killing her.
Right. But it took that long, I guess, for it to just make it cycle what it was already in her system
Yeah.
to start to come out
Yeah.
for her body to try to recover from that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember all the details of the story. So she started about a week after that, she just started throwing up, and I called them in, and her fever had gone up. Come to find out, the child next door to us was a MRSA baby.
Oh my.
So it was systemic. She got a rash again, throwing up. They put her back in ICU, and this particular time of ICU was the longest one. She was very, very sick. And I felt like that was probably it because what her body had been going through, what they had to do to her, what the experimental drug had done, what was already going on with her body before all this. I just knew that was it.
Let me ask you this, if you remember, what was her vital signs looking like? I mean, I don't know how much of that you may remember. Obviously, as a paramedic, I would notice all those things like blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation.
I know her oxygen was really low. They did have to do some blood transfusions because that experimental drug had really took a toll on her blood, which brings me to another thought of one of the reasons why Daisy's Place When I found out she needed a blood transfusion, I said, wait a minute. If you knew this all along, why didn't you tell me? I want her to have my blood.
Mm,
I'm grateful for strangers' blood. I'm not knocking it. But if she can have mine, wouldn't that be better?
yeah.
So they gave me a short amount of time to go to the Red Cross across the street, let them get my blood and get it ready for her. And when my blood came back, it wasn't good enough
It
because
wasn't
I had
right.
not taken care of me.
Oh,
I was anemic. So many things was just not good enough to give to her, which is another reason why I'm so passionate about taking care of caretakers. Because in order to do the job that you want to do for your loved one, you've got to be in a good
100%.
place yourself.
Yeah. You can't give your best if you're not at your best. You're
Right,
100% right.
right. So while she was in ICU, and if anyone has had a loved one in ICU, you'll know this. You don't have a room
Mhm.
because her room is now ICU. They're not going to hold that other room for you to stay in there waiting on her.
Right.
So when your loved one goes into ICU, you go into the waiting room.
Hmm.
So we had weeks of stuff. I mean, I had teddy bears and rattles and baby food, baby bottles, diapers, my stuff, all kinds of stuff. I had been dropped off. My car wasn't there.
You didn't have a ride.
I had no place to put my stuff.
And how long had you been there at this point?
Probably at least a month by this time.
So all of this started when you continued to insist that something wasn't right. You demanded essentially that more tests need to be done. The following morning of that next day, they come in and they say, hey, look, she's got an enlarged heart, which starts the biopsy, which starts the diagnosis of, well, she has this autoimmune problem. Then they're like, let's give her this medicine. The medicine obviously reacts poorly. I like to do a recap so my listeners are like right on the top of where we're at with everything. So the medicine obviously creates a situation of its own. So then they have to stop that. Then she takes a week of struggling through a recovery off of that. And then at the end of that, she starts to throw up, which is obviously going to make her dehydrated. And now she's at a point where everything's starting to tank again. Um, her temperature goes back up, and then she goes to ICU. And here you are, a month into this thing. Are you
Mhm.
having support because you have other kids and stuff, right? So what's going on?
I don't know what we would have done without church.
Okay,
The church just, one lady just made a schedule who's going to take care of the kids what day.
okay, okay. Wow, community.
People would do our mow the grass.
Oh wow.
Food was coming to our home. People were taking care of the kids. I mean, I really don't know how we would have made it
I
without
think that's a
that.
big part of your story as well. And I think that's something that my
Absolutely.
listeners and viewers can take away from this is, it's so important that we realize that we get along better in life whenever we help one another.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
sounds like you were in a great community that stepped up and they saw the need and they're like, hey, you know, let's do what we can. And sometimes that's just as simple as cutting grass.
Yeah.
Here you are, she's in ICU. What's Miss Carolyn doing?
Well, thankfully I had a friend that worked at Vanderbilt, and that first night in ICU, she found a cart somewhere in the hospital, and she let me put all my stuff on that cart and slide it into her office overnight when she wasn't using her office. But I was only going to be able to do that night because it was such a unknown emergency situation.
Mhm.
And because we had lived in Nashville before, we had a few friends in the area, and there was an older couple that had come and got my laundry for me once a week during this other month process. And they had an old conversion van. Remember in the 80s, the old conversion vans were popular?
Sure. Scooby Doo made them popular.
Exactly. I call it the Scooby Doo van too.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about this beforehand, guys. It's just that's what I go to. That's my age
Yeah.
range.
It was a Scooby Doo van, totally.
Hmm.
And they parked it in the parking lot and let me put my things in the parking lot. And so about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I would cry my way out to the van and
That's
I
when you had to
would
leave. Yeah.
sleep
Hmm.
in the van by myself in the parking lot, not safe at all. and get a snack because in ICU at that time, and maybe it's different now, they did not have a bathroom anywhere near.
Oh,
They did not want you in there. And I can see their point, but you got to see my point. This is my baby. You could not
100%.
eat. You couldn't eat. You couldn't sleep. There was no place to go to the bathroom. It was very inconvenient
Hmm.
to be there as a caretaker.
Now, so one thing I want to say on that, because I don't want you to lose your train of thought on this, but so I've forgotten, and that's an important part, was that you guys still lived in Alabama
Yeah.
and you had made this trip to Nashville, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know how many hours that is, probably 5, 6.
No, it's about 2.5 or 3.
Oh, it's a lot quicker than I thought. Okay. So 2.5 to 3 hours from where you were in Alabama up to Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully you knew some people that
Mm-hmm.
step in and help you out with a few things and got the van and that. But so you're not really going anywhere though. You're staying in the parking lot, you're coming right back in
Mm-hmm.
over and over. Is this a children's hospital? I'm assuming.
Well, Vanderbilt has a children's hospital wing.
So
At
it's just
that
a
time,
wing.
they didn't have that wing. It was right before the new wing was added, so they just
Okay.
had a children's area. But now they have a whole children's
That's
hospital.
that's what I was curious of, because I know like in Memphis and that we have a whole children's hospital, and then there's
Hmm.
also other places like at Baptist and stuff. They have a wing of it. So that's what I
Hmm.
was curious of, because that is so odd that they would not think you're a parent, you must be here with your child, because that's pretty commonplace now.
Hmm.
Clearly, you were a little bit ahead of the game on that part of it, so it was not as so accepting. All right, so keep on walking us through this thing.
So I would sleep for maybe, I wouldn't even call it hardly sleep because you're so aware of your surroundings. There's doors shutting, people coming and going, people walking right by the vehicle. How do you really deeply sleep?
You
But
don't.
I'd sleep in the car for maybe 3 or 4 hours and get right back up and stay with her all day long. And again, the only time I would eat was when I would come back to the van, and I only did that at night. So I would bring a few snacks in my purse, walk out of the room to cram a snack in my mouth, walk back into the room. Pretty much I'd cram a snack in my mouth every time I'd have to use the bathroom, which wasn't much because I couldn't drink in there.
Yeah.
I just wasn't taking care of myself at all.
Thus the
But
bad
I was going
blood
to be with
results.
my baby.
Hmm.
If that was the last time I was going to be with her, I was going to be with her.
Yeah. So obviously the mental stress and the physical stress taking its toll on you with all this. Um, at some point, I mean, a mom doesn't give up on their child, but at some point, did you start feeling like, why us? And I know you mentioned your faith earlier, and it's easy for people to go there and be like, what did we do to deserve this kind of thing?
I never did. I never did go to the why us. Um, the only way I made it through was I just said, God, I know you know what's best.
Hmm.
And I just gave it to him because if I had not, I would have never made it. I would have been in the loony bin in the rubber room. There's
All of
no
the above.
telling
Yeah.
because that's one of the hardest things that a person can go through is something going wrong with their child.
I want you to know that I bring that up because I wanted to hear your take on it first. And then secondly is this. I think there's a misconception at times, and people sometimes feel like they're a victim of something because something bad happens to them. And I think that that's just a misconception, because life was never guaranteed to anybody to be easy or fair or any of the above. And it's not so much that what you're going through is a punishment. It can be a test at times, but in the end, I think that it's rational to say that God expects his people to have hardships, but that's why he's there for you. And with that faith, it gives you the strength to carry on and get through the other side. One of the things that I have found interesting whenever sometimes I have had conversations, and by the way, just so everyone knows, no judgment on my part. I completely understand why people go down certain roads and then they feel certain feelings and emotions. And I'm not judging any of that. But I am always intrigued by this, that they feel like sometimes that there is a punishment being done. And I'm thinking, God's son was actually crucified. So he died on a cross. And that's my true belief and my feelings. So who are we to say what is fair to happen to us? That's just a tough thing to rationalize in my mind. It's like, he lost his son. And at some point, obviously, we're, no matter what happens to us, no matter what we go through in life, all of us are going to have an end of a road, but we all get to be back together again with our faith. So that said, Miss Carolyn, I just wanted to ask that part of the question, because I think that that might be something somebody out there watching this or hearing this needs to know is, yeah, it wasn't easy, but you had to lean in on your faith and trust that whatever was going to take place was out of your hands. And you knew that, but he put you there for a reason, and you're going through some stuff, and there will be a purpose behind this at some point, even when we can't see it, when we don't even understand it. There's going to be a purpose there. And I put that into this part of our conversation, because I want, whenever we get to the backside of this, I want people to remember this aspect right before we go to break of why I'm bringing this up, because your story is not lost on anyone. It's going to give others strength. And that's why it's so important for you to be here today. So we're going to go away for just a minute. We have a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hear how we continue down this road and the end of an absolute amazing testimony by Miss Carolyn. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
A great opportunity awaits. The Motivate with Coach Camp podcast is now in its second season, and we are excited to say that we have listeners all over the United States and in 19 countries. If you have a company and you're interested in some very affordable advertising, while at the same time supporting a great cause, please go to motivatewithcoachcamp.com and fill out that sponsorship page, and we'll get right back to you. You can support the podcast through donations on Venmo at Motivate with Coach Camp. Thank you to all the listeners and guests who have blessed this podcast with their engagement and involvement.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Before we went to the break, we've been talking with Miss Carolyn O'Byrne, and she's telling us her long, challenging, trying road of her daughter Daisy's health problems and how she's been able to battle through. And at this point, you've brought us through about 5 weeks of being at the hospital total. She's been up in ICU. You've been essentially living out of a Scooby-Doo van. And I imagine showers are limited. Food is scarce. Potty breaks are tough. So at some point, are you thinking something's got to change? Something's got to give. And at some point it did. When and what did that look like?
The only time something gave is when she got out of ICU. So that week plus that she was in ICU, I didn't have a shower. I had clean clothes to put on because of that wonderful older couple that would keep me in laundered clothing, but I did not leave her. And there was no shower facility for the caretakers of the people in the ICU area. So that was rough. And I don't remember anyone bringing a meal. I think it was mostly just snacks for that whole entire week. No shower, very little sleep, very long days of just sitting there quietly, watching my child and wondering how many more days that we have with her.
Yeah. And so you said that before they sent you home, so at some point she got better.
Well, she got out of ICU.
Yeah.
So she got well enough to get out of ICU. They kept her for a couple of more weeks and decided to let us go home, knowing that we would be coming back every week. So when she left, they said, we're not sure what the future looks like for her. She may be extremely limited. She may end up having to have a new heart, but we're going to give it a little bit of time and see.
Was she showing any mental deficits at that time? I mean, 17 months. No,
her?
Yeah, your daughter. You probably a little bit tired, I would imagine. Yes, I get that. But no, your daughter at that point, were they concerned about any kind of brain damage from the sickness?
They didn't share any of that. They did share that she had a higher risk of several other issues because of the different medications that she had been on. When she got out of ICU, she went back into ICU to have another surgically implanted line. So the line that got infected with the MRSA was here. So they had to take it out because that's where all the infection was. And they surgically implanted a line right under her left breast. And I believe they called it a Broviac line. And it was there from May until November. So she went home with that line and a little fanny pack because she was on 3 different antibiotics through the IV. She was on several other IV medications. She was on another immunosuppressant. I usually remember the name of that, cyclosporin.
Hmm.
She was on cyclosporin. She was on about 17 different medications every day.
And being under the age of 2, you can't just say, "Hey, don't touch this," and expect a less than 2-year-old to follow all the directions.
Well, let me tell you what a trooper she was.
I want to know. I mean, I can already tell she's a trooper. Yes.
There was this little mesh, white stretchy mesh stuff that we would put over her head and and we would tuck her line up in that mesh. And when she wasn't doing her medicine, we could take the fanny pack off. I learned how to be a nurse, by the way.
Oh, you've got to do that. Yes.
We would flush her line and take off the fanny pack, and she would just run around with this little thing on. So she never really took a bath until November. We just did a sponge bath in the kitchen sink, or sitting on the side on the counter with her feet dangling in the sink for months and months. But here she was between 17 months old and 2 years, which, by the way, she was 2 in November. So that at her 2-year-old birthday time was when that line came out. And she was so good about that line. She would keep an eye on it. And if it started slipping out, she would say, "Mama, Mama, Mama."
Oh, wow.
And she would come find me, and I would slip her line back in, and we would have to dress it every night.
Wow.
Which was taking this big square 100% sticky thing off, iodine it, put some gooey stuff on it, and put it back on there. And she did, obviously, who would like that? And I would say, "Daisy, I'm so sorry that we have to do this, but we have to, and we have to take care of that line. So you have to be a good girl." So her little toddler bed was at the end of my bed. And I would say, "Lay here on your toddler bed and put your hands up like this and let me take care of it. And as soon as you're done, we'll be all done." She would do it. She would lay there with her hands up in the air while I would do that. Sometimes she would whimper and she didn't like it, but she was the biggest trooper.
Wow.
I just can't imagine a child that age being so good at letting me do
You
that.
have to understand, I asked that question because, I mean, I had kids. I've got grandkids at 2.
Yeah.
It's what they don't want. It's real hard to force that on them.
Yeah.
Because they're very opinionated around that.
Oh, yeah.
So that is a true testament to how tough she was. But I think she had proven that already while she was still inside of you. She proved she was going to be a fighter. So how long does that have to happen, or how long do you have to go down that road of the care? So you said all the way up to November and they get it out, but then obviously things continue to take place.
Well, she was immunosuppressed until I think November was kind of the turning point of the majority of the medication. She was on a lot of the medication past that, but I think that was when they stopped her immunosuppressant. So I had one that started kindergarten the year. So Daisy was in the hospital May on. That August, one started kindergarten. You know what happens when one starts kindergarten? They get sick.
Oh, yeah. It's a petri dish of viruses.
At this point, they were still in public school. So at Christmas time that year, that's when we started homeschooling. So Christmas time was the turning point to help out, because the one that just had started kindergarten, man, she was sick the whole time, like the whole entire fall. And Daisy was immunosuppressed and couldn't be around. We couldn't go anywhere. I had to keep her separate from them, and it was rough. So after that, she just dwindled off on the medication, but we went back every single week for months. And then it was every other week. And then it was once a month, which scared me to death because it was comforting to know what was going on. And what our goal was to see what was going to happen with her immune system, with her heart. And according to modern medicine, livers heal, the hearts don't, right?
Right. It's muscle.
It's
It's muscle. So whenever
well,
it's damaged, it's damaged.
right. So nothing happened for probably a couple of months. And then all of a sudden, that next time we went, they said, hey, we've got to look, it increased from 13% to like 19%. We were so excited. And then we'd have nothing for a while. And then all of a sudden it went from, and my numbers aren't going to be right, but I'm giving you a general,
Generalized, sure.
from 19% jumped to 20 something percent. And we'd be so excited. And every time it was a great leap. And then all of a sudden she was in the 30 something percentile and it leaped into the 70 something percentile. And then it leaped into the 90 something percentile. So nobody's heart is 100%. Nobody is, I mean, there is no, everybody is something up in the high 90s, but it's nobody's perfect. Her heart is fine. It
So
is.
did the doctors have an idea about what was going on? What was the thing? Or was she receiving treatment, or was it just growing and getting stronger with each time you came back?
When I've been into alternative medicine pretty much my whole life as a mom, because I felt like I kind of had to be because of some of the things that we went through and some of the struggles. But I was in the semi beginning phases of alternative medicine at this point. So I went to her doctor, who, by the way, was one of the most wonderful doctors ever.
I'm going
And
to put
I
a little
said,
context on that. So when you were saying going back and forth, don't lose that thought. Are you saying her doctor in Alabama?
no, her
The one,
pediatric cardiologist at Vanderbilt.
the one in Vanderbilt. So when you're going
One
back
at
and forth,
Vanderbilt.
it's back and forth to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, back and forth
Please
to
continue from there.
Vanderbilt
I wanted to make
every
sure that we
week.
were still there. Okay, I got you.
Yeah. So when they were releasing us from the hospital, so we'll back up just a little bit, I talked to her pediatric cardiologist and I said, I'm going to be doing some natural things. And I would love your direction on that if you have any. But if you don't, I'm still going to do them. And so she said, let me get back with you on that. She gave me a list this long of some of the natural things to do for her in addition to what we were doing. So I believe with prayer and using God's medicine, which is all the natural stuff, that's why she got better. And she's in the studies of why did she improve so much? Like, why? She's in the Vanderbilt studies of here's this case and here's how much better she got. Why? What was
Yeah.
the difference?
We refer to that in the medical world as a medical anomaly.
Yeah.
And I've seen a bunch of those over the years for sure. Those things that you just really cannot explain with the science and understanding that we have of medicine and the body and why a person has these things. I could give you a long story, but this one ain't about me. But my dad went through the same kind of metamorphosis, if you want to call it that, that doctors could not really figure out. And I kind of had ideas of where it came from, but you know, they couldn't figure it out. And I get it. I get that though, because the medicine side of thing, it's what is easily understood because you do this and you expect that. And when things are not working in a direction that people can necessarily explain other than supernatural, sometimes it's hard to wrap their head around. So
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to ask you, so you were saying each time you would go back, her heart was getting stronger. What was that time frame? Was it a regular segmented time frame that you're going back and forth, or was this spread out?
Well, she started out going every week and then every other week and then every month. So how long did it take? It was probably about a year before we hit. I don't know that exactly. It's been a while, but it was quite a while. It wasn't just a few months. It was probably pushing a year before we got to that 90 something percentile.
Okay.
And then after that first year, they said, you just come back once a year and let us check. Well, my anxiety level went up because I had been used to checking her so often, even though it was very difficult to make that drive that often. who cares? I wanted to know how she was doing.
Mhm.
Um, but after that year, they're like, so until they were supposed to stop at 18, but I sweet talked them into letting me go one more time when she was 19 years old. I said, just give me one more time, just one more time before you release her.
So you would
So,
go back every year for a
mhm,
checkup, and her
yep,
checkups continue to stay just as good as before.
yep.
And so at
Just,
basically the age 3+ years old, am I
mhm,
somewhere in there?
yeah,
She's on the uptrend. 90% of her heart's working at this point. So
yeah,
she's essentially healed by all pretenses of the idea of healing,
of
and
the heart, yes.
continues to do well all the way through. So with the autoimmune issue, it sounds like they stopped trying to aggressively treat that. Is that true, or was she still taking stuff for that?
About November, when all
Okay.
the fanny pack came off and they stopped her cyclosporin, which was her main immunosuppressant at the
Hmm.
time. They stopped immunosuppressing her and waited to see if they actually did jolt that immune system into forgetting what it thought it knew before. Um, she still has a lot of autoimmune issues. That's her main issue still, but
Hmm.
it's not her heart. It's
Yeah.
just other things that she struggles with. But I mean, think about what her little body went through and the massive amounts of antibiotics and steroids and immunosuppressants. And she was on, what is it, Lasix that makes your,
Pulls the fluid off.
so go all the way back to the beginning of the story when I knew something wasn't right. One of the big things, other than all the other blue legs and all that, is she was coughing really
Mm.
hard. And you know that cough that you just cough so hard that it almost makes you want to throw up,
Hmm.
gags you, and then you can't go again before you feel like having to cough again. It was a cough unlike no other coughs that my children had had before.
Yeah.
And that cough was just the I the the stick that broke the camel's back or whatever that saying is, the
Hmm.
icing on the cake
Yeah.
to let me know that something has to be done.
Yeah.
And that cough was because her lungs were filled with fluid.
Yeah. I'm actually very familiar with that cough. Running calls on people with congestive heart failure is a common scenario where they constantly have fluid on their lungs. And my dad went down that road too. So, I mean, like I've witnessed it. So you're talking about it clearly. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about on that. So Lasix is not just something though that will help pull the fluid off. But the other thing about Lasix is long-term reliance on Lasix can be tough on kidneys.
Yeah,
So a lot of the things they're treating your daughter with is fixing one problem, but kind of could be creating another problem down the
right.
road. And so she makes it to 19, clean bill of health. And if I'm not mistaken, 22? You
She's
said she's
22.
22 now?
Mhm.
So, man, I'm gonna tell y'all something right now. I got no memory whatsoever. And I remember 22. Win. That's a win for me. So at 22, living a healthy life, normal life. I know you said she's got some other problems, but relatively can live a full 22 day.
Heart wise, she's doing great.
Awesome. So this is where we are in the story because that's a really amazing tale of not just strength by a child, but love of a mother. And I don't think that that would shock a lot of people. Moms are that person. Dads could be that person, obviously, but still, it's like that parent loving a child to the ends of the earth and doing anything it takes to get them healthy, to see them better. That's clearly what you guys did. You made it, essentially speaking. Granted, you just mentioned that obviously she has some other things going on, but as a person living a productive, healthy life, she's able to do that now. Folks, this is where when I read her story, I got chills. I got chills now thinking about this. Because Miss Carolyn, here's the thing. I do believe that people are put in certain positions in life that they would never choose for themselves. And I'm not the one to answer why God chooses who he chooses. I'm not that person. I can't answer that. But whenever I see an individual that has been through essentially, by all intents and purposes, hell on earth at times, and you make it through the other side, It's so easy just to be, and I'm not suggesting that this is the case if everybody feels, somebody else feels different, but it's easy to be selfish in the sense that I've got my life back and you're just happy to have that moment and you go on about your days. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But Miss Carolyn, what you do is what I hope others are inspired to do. You took a very tough time in your life and you found a deep rooted need that needed to be addressed. And you didn't say to yourself, Miss Carolyn, I'm going to wait until I have everything to help everybody. You said, I'm going to help anybody I can with what I have. And you took action. And folks, this is why I love doing this show, because I didn't experience all these things. Thankfully, Coach Camp has not had to go down some of the roads some of my guests have been on, but to be able to be a part of this messaging so that other people can hear this and see this and feel the inspiration and know that it matters and know that you can, it is so important. And Miss Carolyn, what you did next is exactly why God lets some people struggle a little bit more, because they know, he knows on the backside that faith is going to shine through. And in the end, you're going to take action. And what you did, instead of just holding your daughter close and saying, we made it, we're going to live our lives. You saw a need for other families that would go through the same thing. And you didn't want to see a family have to struggle and live out of a van in the parking lot, or try to struggle just to get some snacks when they could. You took action. And when you called me, you were at the very inception. And so here you are buying a house across the street from a hospital, turning it into a nonprofit so that families that come to, and I'm going to correct me if I'm wrong, if they find themselves at the North Alabama Medical Center, which is in Florence, Alabama, she has a house that can house 2 people per room, 2 twin-sized beds, and it's residents from Lauderdale and Colbert County in Alabama. Because obviously your house is only so big, but you're taking action and you're helping who you can with what you've got.
Each one has 2 beds, that's correct. But we're here to help with the people that don't live in Lauderdale and Colbert County, because if you live right here, you live close enough. But we are a regional hospital now. Our hospital's only 5 years old, and we have 2 hospitals. We have North Alabama Medical Center and we have Helen Keller. And I don't care what hospital they're in. Helen Keller is only 10 or 15 minutes away. If they're in a need and their loved one is in the hospital and Daisy's Place can help them, it doesn't matter which hospital. We just have to be located right across the street from North Alabama Medical Center. But if you're outside of Lauderdale or Colbert County and your loved one is in the hospital, you're going to have to drive quite a bit to get here. And Daisy's Place is for you. So let's say you and I are brothers and sisters and grandma's in the hospital, and we live in Russellville, which is an hour and a half or so away. And we're here taking turns. You got days, I got nights. And so we just swap out. And I'm here sleeping during the day and you're here sleeping at night. And grandma's never alone, because I don't recommend anybody being in that hospital without a representative with them, because you never know what you're going to need. The nurses are so worked. They work so hard, and they just can't do it all. And it's so helpful to be right there with your loved one and know what they need and be their advocate to what's going on with them. And so that way, when you aren't over there, you've got a place to sleep that's comfortable and quiet. You can take a shower. We have a washer and dryer that you can do your clothes. We've got a fully equipped kitchen. I'm actually here at Daisy's Place right now, and we have a fully equipped kitchen. I'm not cooking for you, I'm sorry, but it's do it yourself. Cereal, sandwiches, frozen pizzas, lean cuisine, cans of soup, you name it. And snacks that you don't have to go buy. We've had a quilters guild, and we're going to stuff one of those quilts in our Daisy's Place tote bags, along with their every toiletry that they could ever think that they might need. and each one of our guests will get a quilt, because you're not thinking of these things. It's 98 degrees outside here in Alabama, and you come in your flip-flops and shorts, and you go over to the hospital and you freeze your rear end off.
That's a good point.
And so you're not thinking that you might need a blanket. And you're not thinking that you might need a tote. You're going to need that tote, because you're going to stick your blanket in there. You're going to fill it full of snacks, and we've got a bookshelf full of books. Maybe you just need to read or get your mind off of something. So we're trying to provide every single thing that you can possibly need, so that you're taking care of you as a caretaker, and you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about, where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? Where am I going to put my stuff? Each one of the bedrooms has a special coded lock.
And how many
So whatever
bedrooms?
every bedroom has a special coded.
How many bedrooms do you have?
Oh, there's 4 bedrooms. And so you're the only one with the code to that bedroom. So you can leave your things in that bedroom knowing that they're safe. Nobody's going to get in there and go through or get your stuff. It's a very safe situation. Every bedroom has a beep, beep, beep to get in, just like, kind of like a hotel. No card, but just numbers. And your number only gets you in your room. It doesn't allow you in any other room. You can get in the common area in your room.
So, Miss Carolyn, you took initiative and you said, I'm going to do this. You get a house, you have 4 rooms. How do people get a hold of you if they're coming into the area and they need your services? Which, by the way, I don't know if you mentioned, it's free of charge.
Yeah.
You don't charge people that need your services.
Right.
So how do they get a hold of you?
The best way is to go on the website. Probably their social worker will be talking to them about the opportunity that we have here at Daisy's Place. If they see that there's a need. If you're needing to be in our area and you're outside of our area for less than a week, you've had a shower, you haven't run out of clothes yet. It may be a little tough on food, but you're okay. So we have some boundaries about the geographical location being outside of Lauderdale and Colbert County. And you'll need us for more than a week, because that less than a week thing, if she was in ICU, she wasn't in there for long. It was a day or something, because she got better quick. On the website, there'll be a application to fill out. And you fill out the application, it comes straight to me, and then I'll be getting in contact with you very soon.
See, I think that the thing everybody should take away from this is, did you have any special training for this before you started down this road?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Did you have 1,000 mentors that are like, here's all you got to do, Miss Carolyn? What
Nope.
did you do? You took a step in faith. You move forward with what you knew was a need, and you're doing the best you can every single day. And folks, that is the story. Multiple times over, I speak to people, not just necessarily the guests that come on my show, but then people that contact me outside of this that have watched the show or know things about what we do. And they let me know, hey, look, man, I'm just one person. I don't know if I can make a difference. Would this even matter? And my answer is always yes. Yes, absolutely. Because here's the thing, Miss Carolyn, because what you're doing is having an impact on 4 people at a time, 4 families at a time that come in, maybe 4 families at a time. But guess what? That word spreads. And then there's another Carolyn in another state that sees this. And she's like, this is a need over here. Let me start the same thing. And then there's another Carolyn in another state. And then all of a sudden we got Carolyns all over America doing the same thing because of what you started with, a small thing. I'm going to give you one relatable moment because I think you would really appreciate this. There's a lady, her name is Miss Ann Lunsford. She had a passion and a calling to help ladies getting out of jail. She had went to the jail. She realized these ladies come out of jail. They have nowhere to go. They don't have the stuff they need. They don't have their IDs. They don't even have a clue how to get started again. And where do they end up? Right back in jail. So she made the decision, having so little to nothing, I am going to make a difference. And she started bringing women home from the jail to her house to live and set them up. She had strict rules. She had boundaries, things that these people that came to stay with her, they had to, of course, it was all women, but they had to follow these rules. And Miss Ann said, if you don't follow the house rules, you're out of here. But my God, she has changed thousands of lives, thousands. And she started with just bringing one person home to her house. One. And it's just grown from there. So if you are out there right now and you're thinking to yourself that you see a need, something in this world that could be addressed, and you feel like you have something to bring to the table, do it. Please do it, because you just cannot even imagine how much that ripple effect's going to be. Miss Carolyn, you're a wonder and a joy. And I'm so thankful that we have people like you in the world. Whenever you watch the news, it's easy to get sogged down and just be like, man, it's just all going to hell in a handbasket. No, it's not. There are so many good people like yourself. In fact, I'm going to say there's more good people than there are those that want to cause problems, and step up and be that voice, be that positive person. Absolutely, you can make a difference. So as we get to the end, Miss Carolyn, and I thank you so much for your time, what would you want to leave my viewers and listeners with as a final thought?
If you have a dream, pray about it. And in this day and time, everything you need is at your fingertips on the internet. Just go search it out. See somebody else, see what else someone else has done, and call them, ask them about it. Or just, used to, you would say, go to the library, and I love the library. And that's a resource too. But wow, with the internet that we have at our fingertips, anything is possible. So just get started and be persistent, and gather some friends, gather some loved ones that want to help you in your mission, and get started.
Start somewhere, take the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Miss Carolyn. I look forward to seeing how you grow. If there's ever anything Coach Camp can do for you, holler at me, because I tell you what, your mission is something that's important. The world needs you in this world, and there are all kind of people out there that I know can help and join in and do their own thing. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
In Alabama. Hey, to my listeners, I want to say thank you guys for tuning in, being so supportive. Look, I love it. I love y'all's comments. When you send me love, it just encourages me. So I'm going to say, please continue to do that. Go to my YouTube channel, subscribe so you can watch these things. Go to my website, motivatewithcoachcamp.com. Subscribe, watch all of my social media stuff, and continue to tune in. And until next time, Coach Camp out.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want, and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape,